Hello everybody and welcome back to Val Verde Broadcasting on what is shaping up to be a delightful wet Wednesday afternoon in July. I've brought in a special consultant from the exterior who snorted when I said that to discuss Into the SpiderVerse, kind of like on BBC News where they like throw over to a cardiothoracic surgeon about some parts. That's what we're doing. So this is Sam Gavin, who you may well know of previously of Sam's channel, now of also Sam's channel, Sam's new channel. Link in the description. Who is a video essayist and scholar of film. Hi Sam, how you doing?
Hi Richard, I'm happy to be here. I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. You are probably by quite a margin the youngest person who's ever been on.
There you go. I'm very honoured to hold that candle.
Please, man, because we need your demo. We need your demographic. We're all creaky old farts. Like, it's just increasingly, speaking of someone who looks increasingly like a haunted, rusting testicle, we need those fresh faces to bring in. So, Sam and I did a video years ago under previous guises about Spider-Man Homecoming. When that came out, yeah, but which was a whole other discussion. Since then, we've had Into the SpiderVerse, which is a film. I've made a point of not gauging your opinion immediately before this. I'm sure we talked about it on Messenger, maybe when it came out. I can't remember.
Very possibly. There was quite a few people that messaged me actually when Into the SpiderVerse came out, which is always nice.
So, did you hear about the Judge Dredd's escape room that came out? That was announced last week.
No.
Every time there's a Dredd thing, I just get assaulted with sweet, well-meaning messages going. Have you heard about the thing?
I think you tweeted about that.
Right, yeah. So, and like when there's any kind of talk, people are kind of like, "Did you hear about the thing?"
Yeah.
So what I found from following you on Twitter, Sam, is that I have this kind of secondary feed, which is like Spider-Man news and views, because it's like someone liked Sam Gavin liked, and it's you in endless discussions about Spider-Man stuff, which I feel like I've learned a lot from, but I also feel like I'm doing sort of like a single white female thing.
Yeah. Man, I try so hard not to only talk about Spider-Man on Twitter. There was a point after Spider-Man Homecoming came out where it was all I could talk about. But yeah, every now and then I think it's been a week, I can talk about Spider-Man.
Yeah, give it a bit of a refresh, let the batteries recharge, and get stuck back in. So I'm for my part, just to make this clear, I'm quite interested to talk about the techniques employed in this film, and I just think the writing and everything. I honestly think it's a really wonderful film. Possibly, it's up. Spider-Man's weird because it's had so many films in such a short space of time in 20 years.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my favourite Spider-Man films, if not my favourite. It really flew up. And there's a lot in it in that it's kind of, we're finally seeing the kind of mainstreaming of multiverse kind of narratives, and this kind of
big
just
event crossovers.
Yeah, and this was a big event crossover which didn't have anything to build on. Essentially, it kind of went straight into its own universe and stuff. What are your kind of general impressions of this movie? I
probably think it is the best Spider-Man film that's been made. The big thing that draws me to, for one, Spider-Man's a character that I love following generally anyway. But the big thing that made me fall in love with Spider-Man was film in the first place, was the first Sam Raimi film. And it's known to a lot of people how I feel about the current films, but my big sort of thing is that when you get a film that is kind of valiant and actually makes use of the fact that it is, a visual medium, that it's moving arts, and then you have a character like Spider-Man who there's so many opportunities to really embrace the medium of film through, and I think when that opportunity is missed, it's a big disappointment. And when it finally is achieved in a way that Sam Raimi has done it, or in the way that Sony Animation did, I think you really wind up with just a terrific piece of cinema. And I really do think that. Now, I don't know if Into the Spider-Verse is my personal favourite, but then I have a lot of nostalgia for the Raimi films, and my favourite Spider-Man film changes yearly, to be honest. For the longest time it was Spider-Man 2, it's more recently becoming Spider-Man 1, but the thing what was nice about Into the Spider-Verse actually is when I went and saw it, I saw that and The Old Man and the Gun on the same day, and both of those ended up being two of my favorite films of the year. So that was a really nice coincidence. But this I think is a watershed film because it's kind of put more experimental animation back into the mainstream. For years we've had Shrek clones, you know, a somewhat mystical character, or, you know, an abominable snowman goes on an adventure and meets a cast of colourful characters, and then and so if you're Disney, it's about, you know, changing the society around you kind of thing. This was much more of a true Spider-Man story, which is, it's a coming of age story for Miles Morales, and it does something that not a lot of films achieve, which is it is both an event crossover movie akin to something along the lines of like an Avengers scenario, and it is also just a really grounded story about this teenager finding himself. To be honest, every single time I watch it, I discover something new. I'm honestly stunned how packed this film is with just so much stuff that works as well. It's not messy. It's pretty incredible.
I think that's the thing to be had here. I mean, at its core, and this is really something to pull off, because I think the reason we don't, or haven't until now, really done multiverse stuff is because I always felt like when they were adapting comics, it's kind of like, okay, here's the story and here's the comics bullshit we can't touch. You know, yeah. So it's like we can't have the comics bullshit. So it's kind of like there's a reason why, you know, when you do Spider-Man, it's like, okay, Green Goblin, Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, because these are the more grounded elements. It's like we can't start introducing all this kind of complicated woolly backstory, because it's just going to confuse and alienate audiences. What this film does so beautifully is it takes a really relatable coming of age story, and then it kind of plays with the fact, it's like, here's all this incomprehensible nonsense, and that's brilliant, and here's all of it at once. Because normally it's kind of like, oh, well, here's a post-credit scene of Mr. Sinister getting a suitcase. And then this film kind of goes like, no, here's an anime one, a pig one, a noir one, and they're all coming in the same scene, which is great. I mean, it seems, well, Sam Raimi's going to direct like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse.
Apparently, well, at the minute it sounds like he's going to do it.
I'll believe it when I see it. But, you know, okay, there's that. There's of course, Spider-Man Far From Home has a fake multiverse kind of
has a tease, you know, mostly for the trailer.
Yeah, exactly right.
Now, I say that, I'll put this out there now, I haven't seen Far From Home, believe it or not.
Oh, I dug it, but that's not the discussion. I know we have different feelings on those, but I dug it, man. And, you know, Mysterio
I'll admit, it looked interesting, but I just there's no easily, I didn't want to go to the cinema to see it, and there's no easy way to stream it currently, so I'm waiting off until it, because you can't get the Spider-Man films on Disney Plus because it's Sony and all that boring.
Oh, I can't wait for the Sony streaming service to launch. We'll all be rushing to that. It's better than the first one, I thought, and I quite like the first one. But that's finally kind of coming in now. It seems like we're going to have a Flashpoint film. You know, people are sort of now becoming au fait with the concepts of multiple universes, and that was some of the maddest mad stuff that you couldn't touch before in film. And now we're so immersed in it, you can do that.
I think they do the clever thing in the film of, they kind of there is a film that Spider-Man has a film history, and I think the movie does the clever thing of kind of letting that inform general audience's knowledge of Spider-Man going in, because it even then does add little trinklets of backstory of Miles's dad and his uncle, and so any kind of backstory that you might need to know about is mostly about Miles's story, and again, that stuff works. And I think that the film has a good sense of humor, where when it does kind of buckle down into that, you know, they have the scene with Spider-Ham, SpiderMan Noir, and the Japanese robotic Penny Parker, and they use that as a big comedy moment because it's just getting so absurd and ridiculous. And I think when it really dives into that kind of crazy cosmic stuff, kind of just being like, look, it's nuts out there, just go with it. And that's kind of the attitude that the characters have, because Peter B. Parker, who's the main Peter Parker in the film, he is allowed to have this kind of spirit of levity because he's pretty depressed, and he's done it all before, and what's nice is he starts incredibly passive and apathetic, and he eventually comes to this place where he what I like about the film is that both he and Miles learn from each other, and they set up at the beginning that Miles will strictly learn from Peter and that he'll be the mentor, and the film doesn't necessarily go in that direction, but it recalls the constant theme of Spider-Man, which is it's a coming of age story. And what's nice as well is that we've spent quite a lot of time exploring a teenage Spider-Man, and I think Miles is a perfect modern teenage Spider-Man. But what's also nice is to also be reminded that, hey, adults struggle with this shit too, you know.
Well, I think that this is really key to this, because I kind of wanted, when Marvel teamed up with Sony to do what became Far From Home, and this is something we discussed at the time, like, because I remember you kind of felt that they perhaps should have gone more into Spider-Man's backstory. I think that's what you said at the time. And my point was that we've seen it before and we don't really need to.
Yeah.
My view, what they should have done, and I may have said this to you 4 years ago, or whatever the fuck it was, that I always felt that Marvel should have just gone in with Miles Morales.
Yes.
As a live-action Spider-Man, because they went in with Scott Lang for Ant-Man. Not that matters as much, but like they went in and did Scott Lang, right? And it's like, why not just do Miles Morales? Because we've seen Peter Parker 100 times. We don't need another one.
Yeah.
Like, just do a live-action Miles Morales,
which is supported as well by the fact that, and there's even been talk about this by the filmmakers of Into the Spider-Verse, is that Miles's best friend in the comics, whose name is Gunky, I think, who is the Asian student that he lives with in the film.
Oh, sure. And then in the fucking Far From Home, they basically...
In Homecoming, they make it Ned Leeds, who, in not that I really care about, comic accuracy with regards to Ned Leeds, but it's basically...
Release the Leeds cut.
Yeah, it's basically taking Gunky and just giving him a name that kind of characters that is familiar to fans. And it's... interesting, and I maybe it's a discussion for another time, but I do think it's very interesting that the characteristics and agency was taken from a black character that the studio may not have felt would have sold well enough or wouldn't have been so successful, and it was just popped onto the traditionally successful sort of white character. I don't know if there's too much I don't know if there's if I'm stretching when I say there's something to read from that, but I do notice that, and something slightly uncomfortable in the inference there.
Well, it does have those live action. We're very off topic, but as someone who's watched our shows, that's kind of standard.
So Star Trek,
So anyway, Wrath of Khan, the energy of those new live action films and the kind of the Tom Holland Spidey, it does sort of feel a bit more like the Morales energy. You know what I mean? I don't know. There's something. Well, that's what. Going back to Spider-Verse, I mean, because I feel like there's so much to talk about here, but I really love the energy of it, and what I think is really good about it, and it does this in the best way. It somehow reconciles insane, mad, inaccessible comic shit, and then general audience appeal.
Yes.
But it doesn't really feel like it compromises anything, because it's a great... I would happily say, you could show this to a 12-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, it's got some sort of like scary moments, but good movies should for kids.
It's emotionally well-rounded as well. Like Kingpin shoots people. Spider-Man. I mean, are we spoiling things?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. No. If you haven't seen it, that's your fucking problem.
Pretty much spoiled. But Spider-Man gets beaten to death. Effectively, and
in the first act of the movie as well. Because that's I rewatched it the other night, which is when I messaged you. I sat down and watched it again. I was kind of like, oh God, I need to talk about this. I always go to myself, does Kingpin just punch Spider-Man's head in? And he very much, it's from a wide shot and stuff. But it's
pretty
nasty.
Yeah, it's the brutality is heavily implied. And it's a great emotional tool because it makes you want to see Kingpin. It's the old RoboCop trick. It makes you want to hate the villain kind of situation. But it's just also nice that the film kind of establishes early on. It's almost the Incredibles method, which is kind of saying outright, look, just because there's kids in this, we're not going soft. This is going to have real danger. There's going to have real threat, and it's nice, and there are some films where I think the DC animated films, I haven't watched these in years, but I've seen clips from the more recent DC animated movies, and they all look so violent and nasty, almost in a mean-spirited way, where it feels like they're going out of their way to make it violent so that the man babies will enjoy it more than the children, more than the kids that the superheroes were actually made for in the first place. And the film doesn't fall into that trap. It is both for children that, it doesn't hide the fact that there's real threat out there, but it's also, it treats its audience with respect.
Yeah, well, that's it. Much like the best Pixar movies do, and Incredibles is a good point for that, because what I loved about like Up was that like you watch Up and Up goes, kids, before we start, you're gonna love someone and you're gonna watch them fucking die, and if you don't, they're gonna watch you fucking die. Yeah. So anyway, here's a floating house. But genuinely, that's a really good. And I watched WALL-E the other day as well.
Yeah. Pixar's a great kind of reference point. I mean, we watched Finding Nemo the other day. That opens with like hundreds of babies getting eaten.
Yes, yeah, that's it precisely. And I think that it's good to not talk down to kids and give them this kind of treacly crap. So to sort of do something like SpiderVerse, which has real stakes, has relatable characters, has death. I mean, as the Spider-Man narrative does, because in this version his uncle dies, but it's Prowler, and he's not exactly responsible, but he's part of it.
Well, what I like about the lesson of responsibility, and I think my issue going back to, because when we did that fix it in post, like I remember I was so disappointed that I don't really think I had all my thoughts together, and I think in retrospect what I was missing from that is more the motivation. I didn't need to see anything necessarily, but I think it's important to that a lesson of responsibility is informed by a moment of tragedy for Spider-Man, which this film again kind of reinforces. But what I love about Aaron's representation, or his role in that theme, is that it's not Miles's fault, but he still learns a lesson in responsibility because his uncle failed that lesson. And he's also the uncle that dies. So they keep the formula, but there are people that genuinely are shocked when that mask is taken off and they reveal that it's Aaron, and it's a tremendously done moment, especially with the score and the sound design in that moment. Like, it's huge bombast when there's a moment of silence for the audience to ingest it, and then it cuts back to Miles with just this look of shocked, like, grief almost. Yeah. And the music is so loud in the sound mix because it's like it's hitting the audience instantly. It's brilliant.
Well, Aaron's theme, or Prowler's theme, is largely this kind of klaxon.
Apparently it's an elephant.
Yeah, it's supposed to be remixed elephant sounds, and it's supposed to have it's supposed to be threatening and scary, but have an element of kind of melancholy to it.
Yes,
which it does, and it's real threat as well, because klaxons mean warning, but then there's kind of wounded animal sounds, which kind of evoke a kind of more sympathetic response. Going into some technicals for a moment, there are things that I think what kind of separates like kind of Peter Parker and your Miles Morales is really in every level of this film, because like the kind of graffiti thing, the kind of four elements of hip hop vibe that's in it, like the soundtrack, the graffiti stuff. In terms of what's presented on screen, there are some what I really like about this is there are some really, really interesting techniques in here. Yeah. That take it way above and beyond your standard kind of adaptation or even cartoon. And I think in terms of marrying, it does successfully what Ang Lee once made a noble attempt.
Yes, I thought about this last night.
Yeah, and I think animation is more apt to do it. I talk about this. I've talked about kind of crossing mediums before. Films aren't games. Games aren't films. Comics aren't games. You can successfully intermingle them, but they're not the same thing. Yeah. Alan Moore once said that the difference between a comic and a film is that you're dragged through a film at 24 frames a second, whereas a comic you go back and you can flip back, and that's what many of his works are about. People on the internet don't like you referencing Alan Moore these days. They get angry because I don't know. They guess
you're cancelled, Richard. You're cancelled.
And not a moment too soon, Sam. There are things in this film, for example, the different characters have different art styles. That's very clear. They are often portrayed in different frame rates and shutter speeds. which is just like, oh my, you fuck. Because when you watch it, and there is a bunch of people on Reddit going like, oh, I think the film's broken, and it's like, no, it's done. Like, it is unconventional, but like, it's done in different shutter speeds and frame rates. So like, up until Miles becomes Spider-Man, he's done it. They call it in twos. He's done in 12 frames per second. Whereas Peter B. Parker is at 24 frames a second because he's fully formed. So that makes Miles look kind of janky and awkward.
And they join the two. Miles eventually catches up with him in terms of frame rate when they are doing the web swinging scene, when they're kind of getting on the same page. Because I was watching it, I watched this last night, and I realised that I don't know if it's throughout the film, but Penny Parker is in some cases done at 12 frames a second, which is an anime constant kind of situation. Very much informed by... She almost looks two-dimensional. And the same goes for Spider-Ham. Who's kind of animated in this sort of classic Chuck Jonesy... There's almost kind of a vaudeville slapstick vibe with him.
That's one of the things, you know, as for nerds like us, there's this kind of whole other element. Like, all right. come on, man. All come on. There's this whole this thing of it being conversant with the world and the history of animation. Yes. I think it's really important because it's a Spider-Man film foremost, but it's also an animated film. So not only do you have the kind of Chuck Jonesy type thing, like you say, got the anime thing, but then at the very end you've got the post-credit scene for this is probably my favourite post-credit scene ever because it's great. It's really hard, I think, for films to try and essentially adapting memes. It always looks like a sort of weird middle-aged man at a teenager's house party, you know what I mean? Someone trying to
talk hip.
Not only do they do the Spider-Man meme, but they get the Ralph Bakshi animated Spider-Man perfectly. It's exactly right, and it's the pointing meme that's genius. So it's this kind of little it's a tour through all these different styles of animation whilst innovating in its own way. So certain things like the animating in twos does cause certain frames of that character to linger for longer that look like panels. There are parts that look like panels themselves. I think the panel descriptions and stuff don't start until he gets bitten. He starts. So they start actually having a kind of onomatopoeia and things like that. Really taking set. It's mostly the thoughts in his head, and they stay. And there's a proper sense of space with them because he will walk. They will stay in one position while he's walking past. They'll be behind his head, in front of his head. And I mean, there's a point when his spider sense starts going off, and the color palette is almost flipped, and then you've got the kind of spikes coming in from the corner. There's like a frame of spikes coming in from the corners of the frame, and you've got the kind of squiggly lines, the classic squiggly lines above his head, and then you've got kind of a whisper of someone in the soundtrack going, you know, look out. And then when it finally hits him, it's huge text on screen and it's silent. It's really, really effective and visceral too. Very clever. Yeah, that's the thing, because the whole kind of Biff Bang Pow thing, you know, because the Batman 60 series and the genius of the Batman 60 series is the Batman 60 series was taking the piss. Yes. And it seems to have taken everybody quite a while to catch up with that. Like, it absolutely was taking the piss. And it did the Biff Bang Pow thing because it was taking the piss. And people doing that since have been referencing that, really. Whereas this is actually doing it as its own thing. And also, when you put people inside panels and boxes, it's very easy for them to feel enclosed. But as you have described, it's mapping the world of a comic to a three-dimensional space. So he's moving through the panels, and every now and then you get a kind of whoa, and it's kind of, I think, is it like, I can't remember what it is, like doesn't someone like throw an avocado at him and it says like avocado? Oh, he chucks a bagel at someone and it just says bagel. It's brilliant. He took a bagel. It's great. Little thrown away bits like that, like it's so clever. The thing as well that they do with the chromatic aberrations, like the color separation, where if something's in focus, you know, it's more defined, and then you start to see the blues and the reds kind of further separating the further out focus something is, which is a really bold move. And I've heard that that's had a thing with some audiences where it actually hurt their eyes, which is a bit of a shame. But I've people as well going to the box offices saying I think this
It
is
just
really
summings up with the
showing.
projector, yeah.
Yeah, which is fair enough because, like you say, it's a bold move.
Yeah.
It is a big move. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
But what I love about just the visual language is that it is, especially the stuff to do with like the colors, because it does have a really heightened color palette, is that it's all informed by Miles's perspective. We are watching this story from his perspective, and actually going in such a unique visual direction further enforces the idea that the things that make Miles different are the things that he needs to embrace. They're his strengths, and that's his whole arc in the film. And it's not about him trying to be like Spider-Man. It's the things that make him not like Peter Parker or not like the other Spider people. Those are the things that will actually give him the strength to become his own Spider-Man. And I just think the way the film visually kind of tells that, it does what any good film does, which is it's visual storytelling through and through.
Yeah, well, there's a huge emphasis on his stature. He's diminutive. Yeah. So like when we first meet him, camera is at his head height in kind of quite a lot of tight mediums and close-ups.
Yeah.
Which then means that when you have adults in the background, he's always chest height to them. Yeah. And that so goes on and on. And the film's camera tends to go out and out and out as the spider team kind of grows. And one of the more obvious ones is when he goes to the spider cave at Aunt May's house. He looks in the cabinet and the head's up there and his reflection is at the chest. And then when he's ready to take the costume, he's at the he fits the silhouette and the reflection, just as a kind of quite plain indicator of the fact that he's changed and he's ready. It's really nice. And then it takes and then it kind of augments that by the suit comes out and gets spray painted. So not only is he ready to be Spider-Man, he's ready to be his own Spider-Man.
His own Spider-Man, yeah. And there's a lot of moments like that in the film where there's a lot of setup and payoff of Miles not there yet, and then Miles having embraced all that stuff. You've got him trying to jump off a building towards the beginning of the film, and you see him fall down with a big following him. Yes. And then later in the film, when he's finally got the hang of web swinging and he's really come into his own, he goes up the way and you see woo, following him. Things like that, really, really clever, and just as you say, it's kind of just nice visual ways that even like anyone will understand. It's in a way that it's very, very well thought out visual language, where even if you're not like nerds like us, where we're studying film and things like that, you'll get it, because it's just you understand that kind of stuff.
You may have not noticed it, but your brain did.
Exactly,
as they say on Red Letter Media. It's deceptively simple bag of tricks. Because it is by no means simple, but it's because I think they used it in the teaser trailer. It's the inverted descent, because an inverted descent is an ascent. Yeah. So he falls down, but they turn it up because then he's rising. To us, from our perspective, he's rising. Which
was written in the script, in fact. That was one of the earliest things that was actually set in stone visually, what they wanted to convey. There is a line in the screenplay that says, we're upside down, Miles is not falling, he's rising. And it's the fact that was on the cards that early on, like they always kind of knew what they were doing as early as the script being written. The script was co-written by Phil Lord and I think it's Peter Ramsey or Chris Miller. It's one of the two. I always
get them mixed up. Yeah, but only one of them wrote it.
Yeah, and
co-wrote it.
So one of them co-wrote it, and one of the directors co-wrote it. I think that co-writer director was Peter Ramsey. But yeah, it's. The nice thing was, because I've listened to the audio commentary for this, and it just sounded like the team... The great thing was, that apparently... So in 2014, Amy Pascal, who's been the producer for a lot of these Spider-Man films, she approached them to kind of start making an animated Spider-Man movie. And if it was in 2014, I'm going to assume it was when they were planning all of those Aunt May spin-offs and Black Cat and all that bollocks. Yeah. So for one, it's nice that if that were the case, then it's kind of evolved into something a bit more cohesive and less ill-informed. But what's great about it is that when I first heard about this, an animated Spider-Man movie, I thought, okay. I expected it to go straight to DVD. I wasn't really expecting much, and I remember the trailer was a surprise. And then when I finally saw it, the great thing was there is no reason that should have been as good as it was. They didn't have to make this experimental, valiant, animated movie that pushed the envelope, that took the risks that it did. It didn't have to be so respectful to its audience. It didn't need to be so weighty in terms of its themes and its story. It really didn't have to be as good as it was, and maybe that's why it is that way, because it could take those risks. And I think that's one of the nice things about, different studios delivering their different interpretations of these characters, because I know that Fox is now owned by Marvel, and there is certainly another again there's a discussion about when there's not enough competition, how much can you innovate? And I think this is it's really lovely to see it that Sony finally got it.
That was a perfectly timed segue there, Sam, because I did want to talk about this. So Amy Pascal has had
now when I mentioned that, I'm not celebrating Amy Pascal, because did you read recently the news about Tandy Newton?
Yep. Yes, it is.
Cool.
I just had that sent to me yesterday. I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes. So Amy Pascal has had quite let's say a storied career in the media. She's a very experienced producer, but she had a storied career in the media. There were the Sony leaks and everything.
Yes.
It's probably safe to say that the first two Spider-Man films are good in spite of Sony rather than because of Sony.
She did not produce the first two Spider-Man films. I believe it was Laura Ziskin.
Laura Ziskin
passed away.
Yeah, but Sony as an entity,
yes,
it feels like they've never handled this that well. When Amy Pascal came on to start producing them, it didn't instill confidence in anyone, I think, who follows this kind of stuff. No. This exactly like you say, she was in charge of things when this was announced, and it was in the middle of kind of like, well, here's a film about the time Uncle Ben punched the moon in half in this, whatever stupid shit.
Yeah, what have we got that we can get away with?
Yeah. There's Craven the Hunter's spin-off sitcom or whatever. It was weird,
which they are kind of still pursuing currently as we speak.
Well,
Morpheus and Venom and
oh god, yeah,
those movies are still happening.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion about
of course,
that's a well that's currently being poisoned. This was I think this was good kind of in spite of Amy Pascal, probably. Yeah. Like I say, the good ones were good in spite of Sony, and then things changed there and whatever. But when I had no reason to think this would be any good.
Yeah.
And then I saw the trailer and I saw who was writing it, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm just going to put that on my back burner. And then the reviews came in, it was kind of like, oh fuck, it's got a great premise, it looks nice, and it's actually good. I've got to go see this.
Yeah.
I worry about quite often in these cases when they have one good one because they want to do another one. These kind of producers
the sequel won't be as good. I've already accepted that in my mind.
Yeah, I'm happy with it not to be as good, but to still be good would be lovely.
That would be nice.
But I'm worried it's going to be kind of like, yeah, we got this now, guys. Thanks for all the money. And, because that seems to be what happens. So I kind of wonder if this is lightning in a bottle, because it had no reason to be as good as it is, as you've said. Because I think the behind the scenes story with the Spider-Man films, they shit the bed so hard on Amazing Spider-Man 2 that they ended up having to sort of go to Marvel and do a sort of split arrangement.
Please take it. Please help us. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's funny actually that those studios, they almost fell back out most recently, and then it got back together,
and that felt like kind of pageantry, right? There was some kind of pageantry for the press in terms of like, well, Disney won't let us play with their toys, and it's like, well, stop fucking it up then. Not that I'm not going to champion Disney in that or anything. No. So. There
is a good sign actually in that they have come out and said we're going to take our time making the sequels. I think it took about 5 years to. I mean, that would closely match up thereabouts if they were talking about it in 2014. It took a while to make, and they didn't rush it. And I think that's, if they're taking the same approach for the sequel, I think that's a good shout right off the bat. Because I mean, you cannot. There's maybe a chance that you can bash out a Into the SpiderVerse movie in 2 years, but I don't really know what that would look. I don't want to know what that would look like.
They totally could, and it's good that they haven't, because I think it's slated for 2022. So in terms of the timeline, that does add up, because that's another that's a good 4 years for them to get it done. So that's nice. I do sort of think, like, 'cause I watched, I disparagingly tweeted about the Venom film the other day, such is the method of announcing your feelings and desires in 2020. And I, it was fine. Like, Ruben Fleisch is a decent director,
and it has that effect, like, doesn't it?
It's good because it doesn't, because like even the Joker film to some degree has Batman in it. Like, if you're making a film about the dark mirror of someone, that someone should probably be in there somewhere.
Well, I always found it funny that and I mentioned this when I saw the trailer for Venom, he's not even allowed to, like, web onto things with his hands.
No.
It has to come out from his chest. Like, they can't draw too...
God forbid he has the white spider.
Yeah, it can't be too similar. Like, they've got to go out of their way to not connect them. And I don't know, studio political stuff like that is boring in my eyes.
Yeah, well, that kind of shit, because you're watching it kind of go. It's like Henry Cavill's mustache all over again, isn't it? It's about like what is and isn't allowed.
Yeah.
I would see if you told me these guys were going to have Venom, because they can play off all the toys, right? So this movie had Kingpin and Doctor Octopus and Scorpion and stuff. Like if these guys were doing Venom, I'd be, yeah, cool. Get someone in cool to do the voice. Like, great. I'll watch these guys do Venom. If Venom's involved in some kind of interdimensional intrigue, or like remember Spider Carnage in the animated show and stuff. Yeah, I'd be totally down for that. But just isolating Venom, and like, who asked for a Morbius the Living Vampire movie?
Jared Leto, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's just like this weird, because that was Amy Pascal's thing, wasn't it? It was because again, they legitimately were going to do a film about how Aunt May used to be a spy or some shit. It's just like,
it's bizarre as well, because she's since left Sony Pictures. I think she's moved to Universal.
Lucky them.
But it begs the question, why are they still doing it? But I guess you've done Venom now. Venom was the highest grossing October weekend opening ever. So there's
so many caveats in that. So many leap year October weekend, raining but not on a Saturday opening ever. But people lapped up Venom, clearly, and I watched it. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. I mean, there's stuff in it. It was kind of like, oh, cool, that's Venom. But like, another times it's kind of like, why are we here? Why are we doing this?
Oh, I thought it was bad. I mean, it didn't bother me so much because it was so separated from anything. To be fair, my relationship with Spider-Man movies at this rate is I've been so sort of burnt and disappointed, and then occasionally there comes out a movie that I really enjoy. So I don't go in having huge expectations. If it's good, then great. If it's not, then fine. I've had my Spider-Man movies.
It's much less stressful to be a Judge Dredd fan. You get one film every 20 years, and then it's one or the other. So we're due another shit one in 10 years, and then hopefully I'll survive to see the next good one.
Well,
in the 20 years after that.
I was so prepared and sort of like passively prepared for the next Spider-Man after Tom Holland, when there was that grey area of, oh, Tom Holland won't come back, the studios have fallen out. So, I was like, okay, well, they're going to keep making these as long as they can. So
the strange spectre hanging over these is that, like, if Tom Hardy suddenly turns up in the next Sony Spider-Man film under the cooperation deal with Marvel, it's like... but then that version of San Francisco is the same one from Ant-Man.
Yes.
And whatever's going on, it's like, no, don't fuck off, Sony, with your bullshit. Don't come and do...
The funny thing about Venom was also that they made him like douchebag New Yorker accent Eddie Brock, but it takes place in San Francisco because bless them, they have the naive idea that maybe he won't bump into Spider-Man if he's in New York, because one day they'll connect these two universes. It's very adorable.
Because Sony are that lad that keep like bringing Tesco value beer to every house party, and then you stopped inviting him. You know what I mean? It's just like, no. Yeah, you can sit and drink it in the shed, mate, your little San Francisco shed. Don't come in here. Anyway, back to Spider-Man. Because there is I don't know. I kind of feel like we shot the shit out of this one a little bit. I mean, I if you haven't seen it and you've just had like 40 minutes of spoilers, please go and watch it, because it's a really wonderful film. I mean, it's got so much going for it, and you can watch it with your kids, you can watch it with your mum and dad.
And if you are a big Spider-Man fan as well, it does a nice thing of like, it's basically implied that if there's anything that you like about Spider-Man that you're a perfectionist about, it exists somewhere out in that universe. It's the J.J. Abrams Star Trek thing. It's like, it's still out there somewhere. They're not explicitly saying that it doesn't exist. So if you are not that I'm like that, but I know that there are people that like don't like, you know, a monster Green Goblin, or, you know, this film's version of Doc Ock, which in case anyone's watching this that hasn't seen it, I won't spoil, but it's, you know, you can still have those things, and the inference is that the stuff that you like is out there somewhere. So the film is definitely a celebration of all things Spider-Man. It doesn't condemn any version that you may enjoy.
And it gets a pass on that as well because it's set in the Ultimate Universe.
Exactly.
Or the film version of the Ultimate Universe, so you've still got... Well, there's a couple of things just to talk about there. I do sort of like... There are lots of subtle ways in which the Ultimate Universe is depicted isn't quite right. So it's not NYPD, it's PDNY. Mm-hmm. And like there's loads of weird brands and stuff like that.
I like it. I like it because I don't see it as taking place in the Ultimate Universe, actually. I see it as... This is just the universe that Miles lives in, and there is a Spider-Man.
Sure.
Because when they show us in the prologue of the kind of the adventures of Spider-Man, which again kind of takes a lot from iconic imagery that we're familiar with of Spider-Man in film and in comics, and kind of makes him the version of all of those things, is that this is Spider-Man as we know him, rather than this is a particular version of Spider-Man. And I've gone into this in a video that I've made talking about like the way it depicts the two different Peter Parkers. But this is kind of the perfect Spider-Man. So the idea is that there's no one out there who, if they have a preferred version of Spider-Man, won't like this one, because he's an amalgamation of all of them. Yeah. And so you have that as well. Yeah,
it's that nice kind of because he's super slick, but of course the irony is he's the one that dies. But you know that was in Miles's origin.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the thing that makes this Spider-Man imperfect. All Spider-Men or Spider-Women or whatever Spider-People, all of them are dealing with some kind of flaw, and that's the thing that makes them human. It brings it back to the whole Stan Lee and Steve Ditko thing of what if a superhero were a real person? You know, how would someone deal with that? And that's basically all about... That's the way that they depict the two different Peter Parkers kind of enforces that. So the first Peter Parker that we meet is young, he's athletic, he's having a great time, he's married, he's this, he's that, he's perfect. And they even bring this up later when the second Peter Parker in the film, you know, sees himself, and the idea is that the flaw of the original Peter Parker is that his story was over, and the only place that you can take him when he's finally got everything he wants is to kill him off, because it's not his story anymore, and now it's Miles' story. And again, I like that the second Peter Parker does have more to learn, and like I say, instead of a mentorship, they mentor each other, because both of them are going through a coming-of-age story. That's what Spider-Man is. It's really, really beautifully done.
Great little moment at the end. I can't remember the exact dialogue, but he kind of goes, "I'm really proud of you, Miles. Oh, maybe I do want kids." And then it like kind of moves on, and it's great that little, because that's clearly his refusal to grow up is what stunted him and cost him his marriage and everything else. Also, you know, it's great at pitching things to certain ages, because I think Miles is there for the young kids and the teenagers, right? Yep. But then Peter B. Parker is the kind of schlubby, down on his luck millennial that I'm in the age
ordering dominoes,
for. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, oh, that guy's like me. Yeah. Like, he's just sat there and he's got his gut. And
is there anything more relatable than crying in the shower in your Spider-Man onesie with pizza at the side?
And he's got like a little shitty flat with a fixie bike in it and stuff.
Yeah, and he's getting incredibly wrapped up in the romance of two seahorses and documentary because he's so emotionally fucked. It's brilliant.
That's great. Like that's a perfect little bit for my sort of age bracket. Yeah, it's that kind of like millennial Spider-Man.
That's the stuff that I related to as well. So and that's the thing that I like about kind of exploring an adult Spider-Man, because I think the Raimi films do that, especially in Spider-Man 2. But we haven't seen it in quite a while.
I don't own much Spider-Man at all, or much Marvel, but I do have that bloody one. Sam's going to entertain you, everybody.
So Richard is reaching for something, and I cannot wait to see what it is.
Shelf. It's an absolute mess.
Thank you for watching. I'm not ending it. I'm just thanking you for sticking with us this whole time. You know, it's hope everyone's doing well, looking after themselves during the pandemic, which is kind of everyone. The government's treating it like it's over, but it's kind of not over. So
worry,
yeah,
Sam,
look
you're
after
off the
yourselves out there, and
You're off
hope
the hook,
enjoying
mate.
this.
You're off the hook. I was trying to find. I have that dreadful Spider-Man comic from the 2000s that tried very, very hard to be the Dark Knight Returns for Spider-Man. Do you know what I'm talking about? Remember what that's called?
What, the Superior Spider-Man?
No. Like they even do like Janssen and Miller references. Is that Spider-Man Reign?
Oh, like the Old Man Logan version of Spider-Man. I've never read it, but I've not heard great things.
Fucking don't. This is kind of, it tries very, very hard to be the Dark Knight Returns.
Is that the one where he like poisons Mary Jane with
radioactive semen?
Spunk?
Very much so. Toxic spunk. I kind of went highbrow, Sam. Radioactive semen. I would normally say toxic spunk. I am a grotesque human being. So Mary Jane is dead of cancer because he jizzed up her with radioactive spunk. There's all kinds of... Oh, God. I think it has Dr. Octopus's skeleton being dragged around by the... It's dreadful.
I don't know why, but now that you've told me that, and it wouldn't make any sense, but I hope that skeleton has like extra arms.
Skeleton.
Even though like extra bones for the tentacles.
It's dreadful, and the reason I'm
that
bringing that up because it's kind of notorious. I remember when it was coming out, I was kind of like, "Oh, that sounds cool," because I was young and stupid, and I was high off Dark Knight Returns fumes. I was at that point when I was like quite young, going like, "Everything should be dark." It's a very miserabilist take on Spider-Man, and you can do a miserabilist take on Batman. Yeah, because it's in it. You know, being Spider-Man is depicted as being something that's fun and exciting and confusing and painful and difficult, but wondrous and exciting.
He's a fun character in spite of the tragedy that informs his motivation.
Exactly. Whereas Batman is a miserable bastard because of the tragedy that informs his motivation, and it's something So they try to apply that to Spider-Man, and it just doesn't work. The kind of grim, dark Spidey does not work.
It's a testament to how well they do it in the film because, I mean, Peter Parker is not just depressed, he's suicidal.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. It's really... Because there's a nice kind of little message about mental health and self-care in there as well, which is...
Well, watching it this time, I associated a lot with the themes of depression, actually. Because Peter Parker's at his end point, and he... has the scary thing was I remember watching the trailer and I was worried that he may be a bit too insufferable in just not caring, and what's nice is the film really takes the time where Miles challenges that, and at the beginning he doesn't want a friendship with Miles, he doesn't want to mentor a kid, and he is openly saying, I'm just going to go back to my universe and sod yours if it blows up. And of course we all know that Peter Parker is not that big a dick, so eventually there is something in him there's ultimately it's always about him taking responsibility.
Yeah, and there's a really one of the turning points for him is when he meets Aunt May again.
Really touching.
I love that's Lily Tomlin as well. That's amazing.
Yeah,
but it's a really touching scene, and it's kind of like he realizes kind of what he's lost and what it all means, and he gets it all back. Because it's not that he doesn't care, it's just that he's kind of given up.
Yes.
And he's like, it's a goober, I've done this before, give it here.
Yeah.
I'll get on.
He's at the end of his rope.
I really love that depiction by Jake Johnson of depressed millennial Spider-Man.
What's brilliant actually is that, and I notice this every time I've watched the film, which is obviously Chris Pine voices the first Spider-Man that we see, and shockingly amazing as a voice for Spider-Man, which I wouldn't have imagined beforehand. And then when Jake Johnson comes in, it takes a while before I realise that voice is different, because they both seem so much like Spider-Man in different ways. I think Jake Johnson's brilliant in this.
He is, yeah. He really... I mean, I like him anyway in general, but he's great in this. He really sells it all. And there's so much to be said for voice performance like that.
Shameik Moore as Miles is
he's amazing.
I mean, it's 50% of why that, probably more than that, for why that character is so endearing. Since
we're doing this, then Nicolas Cage as SpiderMan Noir. It's wonderful.
That's like a PR stunt that works.
Yeah, it's kind of
guys, we got Nick Cage for our movie, and they can put them all over the promos. But actually, he's really funny. He's got great comedic timing.
Oh, dude, the man's got chops. And the thing is, he knows, even things like weirdly, I've got I've got a lot of time for Drive Angry 3D. I'm not sure why. And I think it's funnier when you call it Drive Angry 3D, refer to it by its full name, much like Under Siege 2 Dark Territory. Yeah. You have to give it by. But if you call it Dread 3D, I'll kick everyone in the bollocks. But Drive Angry 3D, like, because that's the thing with Nicolas Cage, like, he has a really quite a lot of self-awareness that people don't credit him for. People think he's like an idiot, and he's like not. He totally knows what he's doing. In Drive Angry, in particular, he absolutely knows what he's doing. And
he's a very self-aware actor who would like some money, so he'll do the crap. But adaptation, he's brilliant in. He plays two polar opposite characters.
Dude,
in that.
So good in that.
He's great in Kick-Ass. I actually think he's the better actor of the two in Face Off. John Travolta's awful in that film.
Oh, dude, John Travolta generally. At least he started shaving his head and not wearing a wig anymore. I'll give him.
But yeah, Nick Cage is great.
Oh, he's great. Super high camp, because he did. His thing in Kick-Ass was to do Adam West, and this is very much in that kind of mold. He's doing like a Humphrey Bogart thing.
I think the line reading of when they finally arrive at the big Spider-Man event that Wilson Fisk is holding, and they need to infiltrate it, and he says, some poor taste, but it can't be that easy, can it? And then literally just snap cuts to them. He's like, it really is that easy. It's brilliant deadpan delivery.
Yeah, yes, that's really wonderful line read, and that's one of those great cartoon. That's a great bit of cartoon logic. It's kind of like, you are not wearing the same as them. Yeah. All your costumes, like, especially you, SpiderMan Noir. But it's one of those great, because it's one of those things that would work in Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
If you wear the same hat as everyone else, they suddenly think you're one of them. So it's got that, again, it kind of does that sort of self-aware.
And it kind of openly mocks the idea of taking Spider-Man into a really serious place where you can do that ultra, grim, morally ambiguous stuff, but when you kind of, it's all about perspectives, and I think it does it with a nice sort of coat of levity with Spider-Man Noir, because he's so funny. And what does he say? He's like, sometimes I let a finger match burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything. It's brilliant.
All that stuff, yeah. And it's like, where's that wind coming from? We're in a basement.
We're in a basement.
And it's the same as Spider-Ham is kind of like, does anybody else float in the air when they smell a pie? And it's like,
yeah.
Because that's they've all got their own kind of laws of physics and stuff. Like the anime one's surrounded by speed lines all the time and stuff like that. It's
and
great.
They're tonally consistent with the environment and the circumstance. Spider-Ham especially, there's a risk of that character kind of becoming the token comic relief character. But the fact is, all of these characters are funny in their own way. And listening to the commentary, they were saying that in the big scene where Miles is at his lowest point, and they all kind of list off the father figures or the mentors that they have lost in the past. Originally, apparently, Spider-Ham's line was something like, I lost my Uncle Frankfurter, or something like that. And which would have been a really funny line, but they said that they changed it to a more serious line because it undercut the emotion of the scene. And I think having that awareness of, it's gotta help contribute to the storytelling. And actually, I think it's even ballsier to have a character like Spider-Ham say something really serious in that way. Yeah,
because that's the one moment where that scene, you can always tell they've dialed it back, because it's like all he can say is something nuts, and it's kind of, no, he just has quite a serious thing to say about how you should deal with your tragedies and how you should own your tragedy and stuff like that. The great John Mulaney. Have you ever watched any of his stand-up?
I've seen clips of it. I haven't watched any in full, but I discovered him through the film. He's really funny. There's a particular line he gives. I can't remember what it is, but all the voice actors in this are top of their game.
Yeah, he's. I'm going to find a bit for you for everyone to watch when they're done here, and maybe for you.
While you're looking that up, I'll just say as well, one of the other things visually that I think is really clever about the film, because it kind of adopts that sort of chromatic aberration kind of look. The things that are further away in the frame, they kind of become abstract geometry, and they do that a lot of the time when it's kind of panning between things, because they don't use motion blur, which is what they've been using for most animated films since I think Toy Story, and this, it's kind of, it's much more informed by, if you can, just little visual indicators, you can figure out what they're supposed to be. A yellow dot in the background out there on the road is supposed to be a taxi. Your brain can understand that. And by doing that, I think it actually allowed them to do more inventive things as well, because there's only so much you can pack into a computer to render at the end of the day. And when you see what's going on in the very final action scene of the film, I mean, it's visually, it's a spectacle and it's amazing, but imagine trying to render that. It'd be nuts.
Well, so what you've just described traditionally, you know, and you've worked with cameras and stuff, what you would do is use a kind of open aperture and blur out the background, but this uses that kind of, you know, distortion to then focus you to the front, which is something really you haven't seen before. And those kind of big kind of dimensional things,
Jack Kirby dots.
Yes, yeah, or the Kirby, it's kind of, they use kind of like a fusion of the Kirby look and straight up cubism for those kind of geometric sort of...
Well, apparently, when those characters are kind of having their body freakouts because they're not in the right dimension, apparently it's as simple as sort of 8 different camera angles on that character model, and then a shifting of colours, and then just split them all up. It's really, really a nice little touch.
Well, I think because, you know, even if you have After Effects,
because it's them in different dimensions.
Yeah, precisely, and they're outside of their, and it is, well, I've been thinking about kind of like 5th dimensional stuff recently. Anyway,
that'll be in the next movie.
That's very well, maybe. I mean, that's the thing. It's no, I've totally gone off of the rails, Sam. I don't know what I was thinking. It's all gone. Well, I think it's probably time to wrap this up. I was going to say, if you want some fun, John Mulaney did a bit about a police detective called Detective JJ Bittenbinder, who used to come to their school and tell them not to do drugs. And he talked about it in the special, and the real guy has come out and said, like, hey, fuck you, that's not all right. So definitely look that up. It's dead funny. John Mulaney's a great stand-up. He's a really funny guy. So there you go. That was approximately an hour of Spider Talk with UK Spider expert Sam Gavin.
With only 3 mentions of jizz, I think we did very well.
For this channel, that's astonishingly low. People are going to view this as some kind of low point in the channel.
Well, they did last time I was on something with you, so hopefully I've won them back. I liked it, guys. All right, I enjoyed the movie.
Don't worry, it's different now. It's a different atmosphere, and it's way, 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 way less popular than that channel. So there's a smaller sample of people to call you a cunt, basically. That's the way, and I'm happy to keep it that way.
Brings it back round to the theme of Into the Spider-Verse. There's more. We can take more risks because we're less popular.
Exactly. The artistic risk of
they won't see us coming.
Spider jizz. that Mary Jane didn't see Spider-Man coming. I'm talking about his penis. Right. Thank you, Sam. You can go check out Sam's channel below. It's full of great videos. That is link in the description. I'm going to put your Twitter on screen as well throughout, if that's all right. So people can
I'm so sorry, everyone.
I apologise. Don't worry. The bar here is so low. I love it. People always sort of go like, "Oh, I'm a guest on here." It's like, "Well, I want to do this, do that," and I'm just sort of like, "Mate, no one cares." Like, honestly,
I'm really glad you had me on.
Sorry. Anyway, Sam, it's been lovely. Thank you so much, man. That is exactly the conversation I wanted to have. That was really, really good. So yeah, we are still in quarantine. My lovely partner in crime, Duncan Casey's wife, is pregnant with a human child, so I can't go near him in case I give him this kind of lurgy. Yeah. So we'll continue doing remote content and stuff. We've still got watch parties every Thursday, and I'm doing some gaming stuff on Twitch. So thanks very much for checking us out. Credits on the way. We're going to smash cut to that in a minute. You can support us on Patreon. You can buy stuff on Redbubble, or just take a tin of white paint and a big brush and just paint Val Verde Broadcasting on a bridge over a motorway at night. So the next day people drive through and go, "What's that?" And then they'll subscribe. And that's how YouTube works, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Off you go, guys.
Nice. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Val Verde Shop.